Good morning, Chair Hanif.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
You don't hesitate to lean into fights, I've noticed.
Oh my gosh.
Nice to see you. How are you doing?
Well, yeah.
Good.
Okay. Everybody here? We got all the banners? Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Wonderful.
Come a little closer. How's it going?
Wonderful. Yes. Welcome. How you doing? Good to see you. See ya.
Yeah.
How you guys doing? Good to see you again. Good to come in and yeah.
Beautiful video that came
Okay.
out.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're going to start off with a chant. I'm going to say,
Up a little here.
yeah, let's tighten up. Come a little closer. We'll start with the chant. I'll say it loud, say it clear, and you'll say immigrants are welcome here. Say it loud, say it clear.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Say it loud, say it clear.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Say it loud, say it clear.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilmember Shahana Hanif, Chair of the Immigration Committee, and also today's FEMC for an important rally calling on our city to invest $70 million for legal services. I want to start off by setting the record straight that New York City will always welcome immigrants.
That's right.
New York City will always remain a sanctuary city that protects the right to shelter mandate. And we will always push back on efforts that this administration has taken to roll back this important decree that exists in our city. And we must use this moment to ensure that the city invests in the dignity of all who call this city their home. So this morning we are united in our demands calling for $70 million for legal services to go toward asylum seekers.
At least 70
At
million.
least 70 million. 10 million of the 70 would be to scale up pro se legal clinics to support folks apply for asylum, work authorizations, and temporary protected status. And the $60 million would go towards providing legal representation to those in immigration courts. We know that there is a backlog of 120,000 cases. That is a shame. Over several committee hearings, including in the executive budget hearing for the Immigration Committee, and in the final hearing where we heard from Budget Director Jiha, I was really disappointed. We were disappointed to learn that this administration has yet to allocate the $5 million, only $5 million that they've been talking about that would go towards new funding for legal services for asylum seekers. And when we've asked, well, how much have you spent from existing legal services initiatives, they have not provided any clarity towards how much has been allocated for asylum seekers who are in dire need of legal services. We know that our newest neighbors are on a 1-year application deadline, and if they don't meet those requirements, this city is saying we are okay with you all being the next generation of undocumented people in our city, and that is not okay. So we have to do everything in our power, and I'm so proud to join this diverse coalition of people who've been on the front lines providing legal services, providing resources and services to ensure that asylum seekers are met with dignity in our city. Our city can absolutely and must be a leader in the efforts in creating a pathway towards work authorizations, housing vouchers, and other necessary resources for these individuals and families to thrive in our city. And so we are calling for at least $70 million in legal services for asylum seekers. So now I will turn it over to our New York City Comptroller, Brad Lander, who has been a tremendous champion and so proactive in calling for the $70 million. Please give a big round of applause for our Comptroller.
Thank you so much, Chair Hanif. It is great to be with you. Thank you for your leadership as chair of the Immigration Committee on the ground in City Hall and all over the city, really helping make sure that the city continues its tradition of generations of thriving by welcoming immigrants and helping them get on their feet here. Great to be with our wonderful Brooklyn Borough President. There might be folks from other boroughs, but we're all here with our Brooklyn Borough President today. And obviously so good to be with Make the Road and WIN and the New York Immigration Coalition. Thank you. I'm New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, and I'm really honored to stand with this coalition today. Look, over the past year, the city of New York has spent tremendous resources, energy, and dollars helping asylum seekers get into shelter, and we have spent almost nothing helping folks get out and onto their feet. It is well past time we got started, and that is why we're here today demanding at least $70 million for the outreach, the pro se clinics, the direct legal representation, and the case management that asylum seekers need to file their asylum applications, to get their work authorization, to get jobs, and to get on their feet, which is obviously great for them, having in many cases walked across half a continent fleeing violence and war and poverty, to have the chance to become thriving and contributing members of New York City. And of course, it is also critical for the city of New York because it is expensive to provide shelter, and the more that we can do to help people get out, the better off they will be, and the better off financially that we will be as well. We do need substantial resources from the federal government and the state government, let's be clear. The obligation to help people seek asylum safely is a federal obligation, a national obligation under international law. And that is why it is totally unacceptable that the federal government is not reimbursing the money that New York City is spending on shelter. And we're going to keep pushing constantly until that changes and happens. And we also want the federal government to reduce the amount of time and we also want the federal government to, through either humanitarian parole or TPS, make it so that folks right away, not 6 months after they file their asylum applications, but immediately are eligible for work authorization. So we should keep pushing for that to happen. But let's be clear, the city does not have to wait for the federal government to provide the outreach, the pro se clinics, and the legal representation that folks need regardless of the timeline to file those applications, to get work authorization, and to be able to move out of shelter. We can start doing that ambitiously with an all-hands effort with pro se lawyers, with law firms, and with the $70 million that has to be in this budget. I want to just say a couple of things about why this is a crisis and why it's an opportunity. As Councilmember Hanif mentioned, asylum seekers have 1 year from their date of arrival in this country to file their asylum application. And if they do, their application will take a long time to get considered. But 6 months later, they could get work authorization, and eventually their case will be considered. But if you don't file that application by 1 year after your time of arrival, you will go out of status and become undocumented. And in many cases, asylum seekers are not clear about that. The paper that they get when they come across the border is often unclear about where they're supposed to file, about what that date is. They don't get good, clear information, so no one has told them. And, yesterday, I thought this was really interesting and important. Yesterday, Deputy Mayor Ann Williams Isom acknowledged that the vast majority of asylum seekers in our shelter system, even though we've gotten them in shelter, in many cases we've registered them for NYCID, we've registered them in many cases for public school, we've registered them for health care, and yet we have failed to say, do you know what you need to do to file your asylum application? Are you aware? Would you like a pro se clinic or legal representation to help that get filed? And as the deputy mayor said yesterday, almost none of them have done so. And that is so short-sighted of us. So that's why it's a crisis, because if we don't get it done right now, then tens of thousands of folks in our shelter system are going to go out of status when they could have had their asylum cases considered effectively. So that's why it's a crisis. What I also want to talk about, though, is why it's an opportunity. And for that, you're going to hear later from Wynn, Shahana and I got to go 2 weeks ago to an amazing clinic that Wynn and the New York Legal Assistance Group were running at the Navigation Center. The Navigation Center is operated by the city, but this clinic is only existing because NILAG and Wynn put their resources forward. And we got to meet some of the families who are getting the kind of assistance that we're talking about. Not only was it beautiful for those individual families, like to see the looks on their faces when finally a lawyer sat with them and said, tell me your story. I can help you fill out this application and make sure that your case for asylum gets heard. And that might take some years, but in the meantime, you'll have applied, you could get work authorization, and you'll be represented. And on the one hand, you could just see their burden ease and their face light up. And on the other hand, you could see the next generation of New York City being born right in that room, because those are kids who are going to be in our school knowing that they've got an opportunity and a path forward. Those are families who are going to be able to get jobs and contribute. Those are folks who are going to be able to move out of the shelters that Wynn operates and move into permanent housing. This is both a crisis and an opportunity. We must come up with that $70 million to start immediately. This needs to be an all-hands effort. Thank you to everyone for being out here. Thank you, Chair Hanif, for leading this fight in the council. We just want to make sure that everybody over in City Hall, even over the fire engines and the construction noise, can hear us, because over the next few weeks, by June 30th, this decision is going to get made, and either the budget that gets adopted is going to have the $70 million and an all-hands effort, or it's not. Are we going to be loud enough to make sure?
Yeah.
You know we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to emphasize 2 points that our comptroller made. We absolutely need more effort from the state and our federal partners to ensure that this is a cooperative project, that we are all working towards ensuring the safety and success of all asylum seekers in New York City and, of course, everywhere else in New York State. And the second piece is that we want to make sure that the administration understands in the long run, this investment of at least $70 million is a cost-effective measure to support families and individuals move out of the shelter system. And this council has been working towards ensuring that families have access to childcare with our Promise NYC program, which we are calling for $20 million. This is a cost-effective measure to make sure that families don't have to be warehoused in the shelter system, but can be moving out and have access to housing vouchers and other programs that the city provides for asylum seekers in our city. So next, I'd like to bring up another champion from the New York Immigration Coalition, Theo Moore, Vice President of Policy and Programs.
Morning. Thank you. And thank you, for the support of obviously Comptroller Lander, Councilwoman Hanif, and obviously my borough president, Antonio Reynoso. Want to share a quick story with y'all to let you know exactly how dire the situation is and how much we need additional immigration legal services. So earlier last month, probably about the first week of May, an individual came into our office in Midtown seeking assistance. We're still unsure of how people find our random office in Midtown Manhattan, but they find their way there. And this person, you know, was very much in need of just a consultation to let them know which direction they needed to go as far as like their immigration claim. And they told me, you know, that they were from Guatemala, and that for legal services that they had been told to go to some attorney in Florida. And in my very, very elementary level Spanish, I explained to him that unless it's for orange juice or a talking mouse, no one should be going to Florida for anything. And that you desperately need to talk to an attorney right here in New York as soon as possible. Now, we were able to find this individual a slot at a legal clinic at a Key to the City event that we were hosting in Corona, Queens, the next week. And this person was staying in the Bronx, and they were like, look, I don't care where it is, I will get there so that I can talk to an attorney. And clearly they only needed a consultation because when individuals come here, our terminology is very new to them. Like, folks don't know the difference between filing for asylum status or refugee status, or like which countries that they come from and if they have TPS. It's all extremely confusing, especially if you're speaking, you know, you're not speaking English, you're speaking an indigenous language. A lot of our legal terms don't even exist in these languages. We need to have lawyers talking to individuals and actually coaching them through the various processes so that they don't get caught up and have to deal with very unsavory lawyers that, quite frankly, are really feasting on asylum seekers and people that have been coming into New York City recently. Now, we know that we've seen 70,000 plus asylum seekers from the southern border. We're still dealing with the 20,000 plus individuals who have come here in the past year plus from the Ukraine. Quite frankly, we're still dealing with a backlog of claims from people who have come here from Afghanistan. Like, this is all why we need not only the amount of funds that we got previously, but an increased amount of fund, because we're seeing an increased need for these services. And we need to let folks know that no matter where you come, whether you come from Venezuela, whether you come from Haiti, whether you come from Guatemala, Honduras, whether folks are coming from Asia, whether they're coming from the continent of Africa, we're seeing a lot of people coming from Sudan because of the war that's going on there, that once you get here, you're a New Yorker, and that we are going to assist you. And one of the ways that we can assist everyone is by making sure they have access to quality and affordable legal services. So $70 million at least is the bare minimum that we can use for next year. And quite frankly, we need to talk about baselining a lot of these funds so that we don't have to keep fighting for these funds year in and year out, because New York City is going to continue to be an immigrant city, which means that we're going to continue to need these funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Theo.
Thank you, Theo. Theo's story really articulates how desperate asylum seekers are in seeking out legal services, and the critical nature of these initial consultations and how much of a lifeline they could be to educating and building the awareness that folks need to process the rest of their application forward. And so we're deeply appreciative of NYIC's work, and of course to their Key to the City events that have been a vital lifeline to so many immigrants in our city. And then of course the need to make sure that these services are provided in the languages that our families and individuals speak and understand. And that is why the Pro Se clinic model is especially important. Before moving on to our next two speakers, I'd like to do a chant. And so I will say, hey, hey, what do you say? And you all will say, we need Pro Se clinics today. And the second line is, we need full legal rep today. And I'll repeat all of that with you, okay? Hey, hey, what do you say? We need Pro Se clinics today. We need full legal rep today.
All right.
Okay, is that okay?
Sure. All right.
Hey, hey, what do you say? We need Pro Se clinics today. We need full legal rep today. Great, okay.
Right.
We'll try that one again in a bit.
All right.
We're warming up.
We're going to put some chant coaching in the grant.
Next, I'd like to invite Luba Cortez to speak from the Immigrant Defense. They're the Immigrant Defense Coordinator at Make the Road New York. They've been a vital organization in ensuring the safety and sanctuary of asylum seekers. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for being here today with us. My name is Luba Cortez. I'm the Immigrant Defense Coordinator at Make the Road New York. As Make the Road and as many other organizations, we have been in the front lines of welcoming and helping the thousands of migrants who have relocated to New York City by other states and jurisdictions. Many of them have come through our doors seeking shelter, seeking community, seeking housing, but most importantly, they're seeking legal support and representation. Access to legal representation is crucial. Through our limited resources, we have responded to this need by having an all-hands-on-deck approach and running orientations to acclimate asylum seekers to their new home. We just recently launched our new manual, Casita, which is a handy and comprehensive guide to really acclimate those new migrants that are arriving into all the services that the city has. But this is not enough. In the last decade, New York City has launched landmark legal representation programs that have proven the moral and legal value of ensuring immigrant New Yorkers can access an attorney to defend themselves against deportation. At the heart of these initiatives has been the simple but undeniable reality that a person is far more likely to be deported, possibly to face persecution or other hardships, if they lack representation because our federal immigration system does not truly give them access to representation. At a time when many new and existing immigrant New Yorkers are desperately looking for legal assistance, it is time for the city to build on the success of a lot of these legal initiatives and legal services infrastructure that has helped build in the last decade by investing a minimum of $70 million for the upcoming fiscal year to be able to expand these legal services across immigrant communities, and in particular the asylum seekers who have complex immigration cases that need in-depth legal assistance. Organizations like Make the Road are committed to ensuring that all immigrants have a fair and fighting chance when they're going to court. But in order to do that effectively, the city really needs to step up in this moment and provide a robust budget that is responsive to the needs of the city right now. Immigrant New Yorkers need better and more expansive access to legal representation in their immigration proceedings because the alternative is dire, like folks have already shared today. Without proper legal representation, it is likely that many of our newest neighbors are going to miss that window to apply for asylum that folks have already said is really crucial because it could lead to their applications being denied. We know this because we have already been seeing that a lot of people aren't aware of the legalities of their cases. So this puts them in a precarious position that is going to impact their access to a lot of the services that they need to thrive, like Councilwoman Hanif has already talked about. So far, the city's efforts has really fallen short on legal representation, and the city really needs to continue to allocate money for these individuals so that they can thrive. With access to quality legal representation, asylum seekers can have a path to access these resources and mitigate the harm and trauma that they have already experienced coming to New York City. Access to housing, work, community, food are all important components of a holistic approach that we can have with our new neighbors. And it's the city's job to be able to live up to that. So thank you. And I'm going to say, yes, we can. And then folks just repeat after me. So, yes, we can.
Yes,
Yes, we
can.
can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luba. We are so fortunate and grateful to organizations like Make the Road and focusing on creating toolkits and guides like Casita. Thank you so much for that important work. That should, of course, be coming from this administration, but we're so grateful for the ways in which Make the Road has become a social safety net for so many asylum seeker individuals and families and youth. So we're tremendously grateful. Thank you so much. We look forward to continuing to support that work. Now I'd like to invite my Brooklyn Borough President, Antonio Reynoso.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Chair Hanif. My name is Antonio Reynoso, and I'm the president of the greatest borough in the city of New York, which is Brooklyn, first and foremost. And I'm so happy to be here because the work that our chair is doing in advocating for at least $70 million is extremely important. What we're talking about is spending money to save money. What we need to start doing is not only warehousing folks, which it seems like what the city is doing at this moment, and is treading water and has an inability to escape this crisis because they're not thinking proactively. They're being very reactive. If we think proactively and we can get folks to work, give them the resources they need to make a permanent home here in the city of New York, then we can get them out of our systems in which the resources are being expended and into allowing them to work and to create great lives for themselves here in New York City. So we're telling the mayor, this $70 million, at least the $70 million, long term is going to be a great cost savings for the city of New York. And we're doing that because it seems like we're only talking on economic terms and on financial terms when it comes to this crisis and when it comes to this, the building behind us in City Hall. The human aspect of that is that a lot of people are going without resources. A lot of people are moving about this city without starting these legal proceedings and these legal processes that are going to be extremely important to their well-being in the city of New York and in the United States of America. And for human sake, because we care deeply about the migrants that have come here, we should be doing everything in our power to making sure that they can secure these legal services so that they can get about beginning their lives here in New York. So I want to thank Councilmember Hanif for all of the work that she's doing in advocacy, and I'm going to do it very quickly in Spanish. Nosotros lo que estamos pidiendo ahora mismo de parte del alcalde, al lado de la cabeza del Comité de Migración, a la concejal Hanif, es a mínimo 70 millones de dólares para comenzar a buscarle servicios legales a los migrantes que están llegando aquí a Nueva York. Si comenzamos el proceso de ayudarlos con asilo y todos los papeles y los recursos que necesitan para estar aquí y comenzar su vida en Nueva York, podemos ahorrar dinero en el futuro. Lo que estamos diciendo es que con poco dinero pueden asegurar que están aquí con un estatus legal que lo vas a ayudar a poder buscar trabajo, comenzar a estar en nuestras escuelas y usar los recursos de nosotros que ya están disponibles fuera de los recursos que estamos usando para tenerlo en shelters y otras áreas a donde está jalando mucho dinero de la ciudad de Nueva York. Con un poco dinero podemos ahorrar mucho dinero y con ese trabajo al lado de la concejal Hanif podemos lograr mucho. Muchas gracias y Dios me lo bendiga. Thank you.
Thank you to Borough President Reynoso for conveying a message of care for asylum seekers and recognizing that the $70 million is not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money at all. We should be doing more to make sure that every single asylum seeker is on a pathway towards success in this city, and that begins with robust, comprehensive legal service representation. Next, I'd like to call Fumi Akinawonu, Advocacy and Policy Manager with Immigrant ARC, and they've been doing incredible work not just in our city, but across counties in our state to ensure that asylum seekers who are living in other parts of New York State are cared for and have the legal services representation they too need. Fumi, thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Fumi Akinawanu. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager at Immigrant ARC. We're a member-based organization that includes over 80 immigration legal service providers across the state of New York, including here in New York City. And New York City is incredibly lucky to have a dedicated community of immigration legal service providers that are working to ensure that immigrants across the city are able to have representation when it comes to all of their immigration legal services needs. But the reality is that the funding that exists, not just at the city level, but including at the city level, is not sufficient to take care of the current caseloads of these immigration legal service providers. And not only are they working to ensure that immigrant communities that have been here for many years are taken care of, but also our newly arrived migrants. And it is incredibly important for New York to step up in this moment and live up to its promise and its rhetoric for being a place that is welcoming to immigrants. Immigrants are a fundamental part of communities across New York City. And having representation is the single most determinative factor of whether or not someone is going to have success in the immigration case, whether or not they're going to be able to have and maintain employment authorization. And individuals who are in need of immigration legal services and are facing deportation to places where they fear persecution or could face death deserve to have an opportunity to be heard in immigration proceedings. Our immigration system is incredibly complex, and it is very unforgiving to procedural errors or missed deadlines. So people who are looking to take care of their families, who are part of communities across New York, who are trying to live and are enriching and in community with all New Yorkers, need an opportunity to be represented to ensure that their immigration cases are conducted in a proper manner, and so that they can continue to be our family, friends, neighbors, and community. So that's why there is real opportunity in this moment for the city to increase funding to at least $70 million to not only provide immediate immigration legal services, but also create the infrastructure that is necessary to deal with the ebb and flow that is typical of migration, so that there are no more moments of scrambling, but only moments where we are in a position to determine what services are needed to provide that essential care and to allow communities to go on with their lives. So that's why this increase to $70 million at least is so incredibly vital. And it's really important that New York step up in this moment and show who New Yorkers are, and show people around the country and around the state that we can take care of immigrant communities, because immigrant communities are a fundamental part of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fumi and IARC, and to all of the legal services providers under IARC that absolutely recognize the urgency in the need to build a legal services infrastructure that supports the capacity for our providers to swiftly support asylum seekers in this moment. Next, I'd like to invite Henry Love to speak. He is the Vice President of Policy and Planning at WIN, and our comptroller shared earlier that we had the deep privilege of visiting the Pro Se Clinic at the Navigation Center in partnership with NILAG, and the city can be replicating those efforts today. Henry.
Good morning, I'm Dr. Henry Love, and I'm proud to serve as the Vice President of Policy and Planning at WIN. We're the largest family homelessness organization in the country and in the city of New York. And that's why we're here today, because we have 270 families that are asylum seekers. And in the fall, when these families first began to come into our shelters, we were confused. We're housing folks. We're not immigration experts like some of my colleagues up here. And we really didn't understand the immigration process. And when we talked to many of our clients, they said, we've began the process, we've thought we've started. And what we began to learn very early on is that people thought they had started when they crossed the border. And in reality, they actually hadn't started the process at all. And so when we talk to our families, the biggest thing that they want to do is to be able to work and take care of their families and ultimately be able to get out of shelter. And so the clearest pathway to work authorization is asylum. And so, we worked with the city. We were waiting for the city to do something beyond know your rights, legal instructional courses or whatever you would call them. And we were able to pair up with NILAG to figure out, is there a way for us to actually pair up to get these applications done? And so we paired up with NILAG and with Fragaman to get pro bono lawyers to do a series of pro se legal assistance clinics. And we built this from the ground up. And so far we've helped over 36 families apply for asylum, which is an incredibly arduous process. And I want to be really clear about something. So many of these families are going to time out on that 1-year deadline. This is a racial justice issue. Many of the families that we are receiving in our shelters are indigenous, are Afro-descendant. When you talk to them and you hear the stories about why they were immigrating, from the violence that they were facing in Garifuna communities in Honduras, to indigenous communities in Ecuador and being, pushed out. They have incredibly strong asylum cases, and it would be an ultimate shame because of the bureaucracy of our system, the complexities, that they wouldn't be able to submit the application and be able to ultimately get asylum in this country. So I stand here with Chair Hanif and the Comptroller, pleading with the city to include that minimum of $70 million in the budget to help our families and to give them some type of pathway to get out of shelter.
Thank you to Dr. Henry Love and the WIN team for their tremendous leadership. And I had the opportunity to also visit the Pro Se Clinic in my district at the shelters that are in my district and alongside our comptroller to see their work from very early on. And so to see them now at the Navigation Center is a tremendous step forward, and I look forward to this administration replicating their efforts. And the other piece that Dr. Love brought up is that this fight for full legal representation is a racial justice fight, and we must see it as that. So thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Kennedy from Public Advocate Jumani Williams' team.
Thank you, Council Member and Chair Hanif, for your leadership all of the time. Thank you to our Comptroller and our Borough President, Reynoso. Thank you to advocates that make the road, WIN, IARC, and NYC that are here. My name is Elizabeth Kennedy, Deputy Public Advocate for Education and Opportunity at the Public Advocate's Office. While our Public Advocate, Jumani Williams, could not be here, he is absolutely here in this fight to echo the leadership of our chair and of our advocates for at least $70 million investment in legal services. As you've heard, this is the ground floor of what we are asking, because this provides critical resources that open up opportunities for our asylum seekers, for our neighbors, our newest New Yorkers. And that is so important because it is about their right to work. It is about their right to stay in New York. It is about their right to education and opportunity that many New Yorkers before them, many immigrants, our many leaders that are elected and otherwise have had. And so they deserve that right. This is also about sustaining our legal services overall in New York City. This is about saying we understand the incredible solution makers behind us that are creating solutions every single day to make sure that collaborative work is happening across advocates and legal representation and folks that are mutual aid groups, right, across the city. And so this is about fortifying those incredible solution makers, the incredible people that are making this happen for our families, for our fellow neighbors every day, and saying that we must have this now because we know every single day is a day that is critically important to the lives of our fellow community members, of our newest New Yorkers, and we cannot wait. And so we thank, again, the leadership of Chair Hanif, of all of the advocates here that continue to raise this up and make sure that we get this funding, not tomorrow, but absolutely today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are so grateful to the Public Advocate's support and his team's support. And with that, thank you so much to all of our advocates, to NYC, IARC, Make the Road, and all others who are not here but have continued to champion the rights and protections of all asylum seekers here who've come a year ago or who are just coming in today, and to all of the elected officials, and especially our comptroller, our Brooklyn Borough President, and Public Advocate Williams for joining us this morning. We have so much work to do, and our fight will continue to bring in the investment of at least $70 million for the pro se clinics and legal representation in the immigration courts. And with that, say it loud, say it clear.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Say it loud, say it clear.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Say it loud, say it clear.
Immigrants are welcome here.
Thank you.
I think there's some folks with questions. So. Yeah. I think the disconnect is, and I'll just add, some of you were at the press conference yesterday with Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom, who more or less said we need to be doing more of this. We've started doing a little, we need much, much more, like she said it as well. I think there's two reasons why we aren't doing more yet. One is obviously the logistical challenge of scaling up the shelter system has just been what the administration has been focused on, and that, you know, is where their attention has been, and not on the work to stand up this new system. And then second, and this one I actually really think is important to recognize, prior to the arrival of this set of asylum seekers seeking shelter under the right to shelter, we didn't ask people's immigration status at the front door of the shelter system. And that was the right thing to do. We don't want immigration status to be a barrier to shelter. But as a result, we don't have the outreach or the database tools just built into the system that would say to someone, you know, do you know the process for filing for asylum? Do you know what date you arrived? Can we see the papers and make sure, you know when you need to? Can we connect you to legal services? None of that was in place before for that good reason. Now, by 6 months ago, when it was clear what was happening, we already should have moved to change it. And we're just moving far too slowly. Like, yes, the challenge of getting people into shelter. Yes, the challenge of pushing Washington and Albany to do more are real, but we are now badly behind on exactly the outreach and legal service provision. And that's why we're out here. We believe that there's capacity to do it. We're trying to bring the political will. It will be primarily for contracts to the exact providers that you're talking about. And I think there's a few separate parts of that, as you say. First, there's outreach. You got to go knock on doors and say, hey, would you like this help? Because otherwise folks don't know that it's available. And there's some organizations that do that outreach. Obviously, they need to do it in the languages that people speak and with a real understanding and compassion for the, concerns, anxieties that folks have. So there's the outreach component. Then there's these pro se legal clinics that we chanted for. I never chanted for pro se legal clinics before. But those are also being organized already by providers like, New York Immigration Coalition does that. New York Legal Assistance Group does it. There's a great opportunity there to bring in volunteer lawyers as well. But you have to have the infrastructure in place. Then there's direct legal representation, and that similarly is the coalition. There's a great coalition of legal service providers through Keys to the City, but also through the Immigrant Opportunity Initiative. So that's NILAG, Legal Services NYC, Legal Aid Society, Project Russo, the Latin American Legal Resource Network. So there's a set of providers, and they're ready. Chair Hanif mentioned that earlier on the city said we'll put $5 million out, but they didn't talk to those providers in advance about how to actually make it work and what would be enough resources to do it. So yes, that's what we're imagining would happen with these resources. And I'll just say in the controller's office, we have granted emergency contracting approvals to let the city move more quickly for when they need to open a new hotel. We would be so eager to grant emergency approval to allow that money to move very quickly out to the providers who can provide those services.
And I'll just add to that, to the point that Elizabeth made from our public advocate's office. We have seen the solutions already taking place. And the groups that you're talking about have already been either leading on a pro se clinic or other efforts to make sure that asylum seekers begin their application within that 1 year deadline. And right now they are up against a deadline. And so we need to replicate and ensure that the full investment is there to support the capacity of these organizations who have the solution, and that our city replicates wherever else. With the $5 million, as our comptroller mentioned, the providers were not engaged with, and they had been demanding more money, recognizing just the arduous nature of asylum applications. They take years, and we had been shuffling families from shelter to shelter, location changes, school change. I mean, there's so much precarity involved that the $5 million is not enough. And in our hearings, they've mentioned that they too will have a part of that $5 million go towards pro se clinics. So right now we know that we see the pro se clinic as one type of model, but we also need the funding to support those who are already engaged in the courts to support their full legal representation as they go through that process as well. There's full support from the council in calling for $70 million. We want solutions. We know what keeps families whole in the city, instead of creating a revolving door system that either families have to self-deport or get deported. We recognize the urgency, and those were some of the questions we asked during that final budget hearing to Budget Director Jiha around $70 million, and again did not receive an adequate response. Was reminded of the $5 million that is yet to be allocated. They are up against the June 30th deadline as well, so we look forward to seeing how they engage existing providers with that money, but the council recognizes the urgency for full legal representation at this time.
Now, you probably saw yesterday or the day before Speaker Adams' remark about moving away from a panic response to a proactive response. This is exactly the kind of thing that looks like. It's budget season, and members do have a lot of different things they're fighting for. Having the committee chair of the relevant committee is generally what's most, kind of important and signals the council's support in this direction.
Sure. I mean, the question shouldn't be about how realistic is it. We need to fight for the full investment right now. We need to support and recognize the urgency that the city has in supporting asylum seekers. And so, as we've mentioned over and over, $70 million is very little funding to go towards a long-term investment as we move families out of the shelter system. So in the long run, this supports our shelters, this supports families overall, and so I am hopeful that we will deliver the at least $70 million.
I'll just add, let me just add here, I don't think it's just in the long run. I actually think even just next fiscal year, spending this $70 million will save several hundred million. The cost of providing legal representation is far less than the cost of even 3 months of shelter, much less a year of shelter. Correct. And it won't work for every single family, obviously, but if you do that outreach and provide representation, a good number of those families are going to get work authorizations, 6 months from the date of filing, and then be able to move out of shelter with a job. And shelter is very expensive, and legal representation is not very expensive. So this will save money, probably even in FY24, but certainly for the longer term. I can do this.
Our city absolutely has $70 million, for sure.
So 2 points here. First, we project, actually not we just project, the Office of Management and Budget projects that the city will end this year with a $1.7 billion surplus. Tax revenues this year are up to year-to-date 5.8% over last year. So that's part one. Like there's out of $1.7 billion surplus, $70 million, you'd still have a $1.6 billion surplus. But in addition, if you don't do it, you're going to wind up spending more as those families stay in shelter next year. So it's penny wise and pound foolish not to do. Thank you all. Nice job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all.